One of the questions I get the most is, why does my glaze not turn out the way it's supposed to? In one of my last videos, I was talking about how to make your own ash glazes. I also tested some other glazes in that video. One of them was a Temmoku Gold. It was the first time that I was using it, so I was very happily surprised with the results because it was so beautiful. It turned out perfectly the way that I wanted, ranging from black where it breaks over edges into this gold, very, very beautiful glaze in my opinion. And I showed it to some other friends and on Facebook, and lots of people were like, wow, it looks really great, but I tried this glaze and it just doesn't look that way to me. So why is that? Why can one glaze look so different when I use it or when you use it? In this video, I'm going to talk about all the variables that affect how a glaze comes out. And I'm going to do some tests so you can see what affects it and how you can maybe manage it in a better way yourself. So let's move on with that. There's a lot of variables that determine how a glaze turns out. One of them is the chemistry of the glaze, another one is the firing, and another one is the clay. The chemistry of the clay of the glaze should be the same if you follow the same recipe or if you buy a commercial glaze, but it's not. The problem is that even though you buy the same material, let's say you found a good recipe on glaze.org and you want to make that, and you buy the materials that you're supposed to, and you're expecting to get the same results as the photos that you saw. The problem is that a lot of these chemicals are not exactly the same. For example, if it's a stone that is mined, in the beginning of the mine, the chemistry of that material may be different than deeper into the mine. That's just a fact of nature. There's nothing we can do about that. So even if I buy a bag of material and you buy a bag of material, it's labeled the same. It's supposed to be the same. It's maybe not the same. And also it could be mined in different parts of the world, what you're getting and what I'm getting, and then it will definitely be different. So the materials, the raw dry materials we use are not always the same. It's a little better with frits because they're produced in chemistry factories and they're supposed to be more consistent. But first of all, a glaze is not just using frits. You're also always using other materials, and some of them are doomed to be a little bit different. And also, even the factory-produced materials can change. I mean, the raw materials that the factory is using may change. There may be other reasons why, I don't always know, but they're not completely consistent. And that's just the dry materials. A very important component in a glaze, of course, is water. And water is not the same. The water that I use here in my house have a lot of calc in it. That's just the nature of the water we have. In another area, there may be much less calc, and there may be other elements in your water, and that does change the glaze as well. Some people like to use distilled water to have a more consistent type of water, but then again, that would be different than the tap water that I'm using. So by that, even if you try to replicate the way that I make a glaze, it may not turn out exactly the way that you do it. So that's the chemistry. Then there's the firing. You can fire electric, you can fire in wood fire, and you can fire in reduction or oxidation and gas kiln. You can fire in many different ways. I do most of my stoneware firing in the electric kiln. I have a Nevitam, 190 liters. I love it. But I have limited space in my house. In my workshop, I cannot have a selection of pots that needs to be fired at this cone, and another selection that needs to be fired at this cone and this schedule and so on. So I decided to just use one firing schedule and always fire to cone 6, glaze fire to cone 6. Some potters would say, well, but then you can't do great cone 6 glazes, and you need to have different schedules for different glazes. And that is, theoretically correct. But the thing is, when I focus on just cone 6 glazes and I'm using the same schedule, I'm also I'm also limiting a very important variable. So instead of trying out different chemistry, different firings, different clays all at once, and that becomes like a million different variables, I kind of narrow it down and say, okay, I'll always do this sort of firing. I always do cone 6, and I always use this schedule, and then I try to find glazes that works with that. It's kind of like a different way of doing it than most potters would. I kind of like that because it's reducing the variable. So that's the firing. The last part is the clay. And this is actually what I'm going to be focused on in this video. I have thrown some bowls, some small bowls that are very good for glaze tests. I also like them for like breakfast, the soups and stuff, because they have these, it's a facet sort of bowl. So you have these nice areas where the glaze can break, and a nice even surface on the inside. And I made this nice little foot, so it's very easy to dip in the glaze if that's what I want. And I'm only going to glaze it down to about here, and I'm going to leave this as a raw clay ceramics. So I made like 35, 40 of these bowls, and I made them in 5 different kinds of clay. It's a stoneware, buff, whitish stoneware. There's a reclaim clay. There's a high iron stoneware. There's 2 different kinds of black. One of them I used a lot, and it's very nice. And the other one is kind of new to me. I haven't used it so much. It's a little more bluish kind of black. So these 5 different types of clay are definitely going to make the glazes look different. So we're going to try out with at least 2 glazes that I like a lot, and that you guys like, that a lot of you guys also like. I know that. Actually, I think I'm going to try 3. I'm going to do Folk Art Gilt White. I'm going to do Temmoku Gold. I'm going to do Floating Blue. Floating Blue is the one that I use the most, and it's actually very consistent over different kinds of clay. So we'll see how it works out here. Folk Art is definitely very different on different types of clay. And Temmoku Gold is, well, it's kind of new to me. I only used it very little, but I had good results in the first go, and that was on Reclaim. So let's see how it turns out on the other types of clay. Before I start glazing, I will add some wax to the bottom of my pot, because as I mentioned, I will only glaze down to here where it kind of breaks, and it's just so much easier when you put wax on it. I tried different kinds of wax and I ended up with this one. It's not important with the brand, but what is important is that it's pink, because sometimes it can be difficult to see where you apply the wax, and this one is very easy to see. Before I put the wax on, I will write a number at the bottom of each of the pots. I could have scratched it in before I trimmed them or after I trimmed them, but I forgot to do that. And because I'm doing so many glaze tests, it's impossible when you take it out the kiln to see, which one you did what with. So I always add a number and then I put it on a list. So because I forgot it, I'm going to add it with this underglaze pen instead. I haven't actually used it before, but it should be good. Yeah, you see? And it's an underglaze, so it should stay there. Now we're ready to do the waxing. I'm just gonna center it. It's not super important that it's very centered, but reasonably centered. It should be fine. So that's about it. Maybe if there's a little bit, I didn't get that way, I will do it off the wheel, and especially with my marker's mark, I want to make sure that there's enough wax there, because I don't want the glaze to go in there at all. So that's it. Now it's just the rest of the pots. Most of the pots have been waxed now, and they're ready to be glazed in maybe an hour or two. I want the wax to be completely dry before I move on with the glazing. I'm going to take them downstairs, but when I do that, be careful not to stack them inside each other, because if some of this wax gets to parts where you want to glaze, the glaze is not going to stick. So always put them foot to foot when I stack them and take them downstairs. It's a little more safe. This is the spreadsheet that I prepared. As you see, I have 5 different types of clay, and I have 3 primary glazes that I'm going to use: Temmoku Gold and Floating Blue and Folk Art Gilt White. But then I'm going to combine them with the different glazes, with the different clays. I'm going to add some enhancements. I'm going to use my ash glaze, the ash glaze that I explained how to do with pitfire ashes in the other video. I think there's a link here somewhere. And I'm going to add some white, the Heath A2, on the inside of the floating blue bowls. So let's go ahead. I haven't added the ID yet, because I just gave all the bowls IDs, and I don't know yet which one is going to be what. So I'll add it as I go along. I'm going to start with Floating Blue, one of my favorite glazes. And always remember to mix it or stir it before you dip your pots. And in this case, I'm just going to do the inside first. And this glaze needs a very thick layer to look good. So I have plenty of time to circle it around, and like this. That's fine. And then empty it, shake a little bit, and it drips off. And then I'm just going to dip it, and I have the wax here, so I'm just going to do it to about the edge, and it's very easy to get off it. Oh, see, it dripped off. It splashed. But just by shaking it, sometimes it's enough. And if not, I have a small sponge, so I can just take these small areas. And as I said before, it can sometimes run down here. So because of the facets, I think, otherwise it doesn't run too much. So I'm not going to add too much down there, but I'm going to add a little more in the upper layer, because as I said, this glaze can be very, very thick, and well, the thicker the better with this one. So, yep, like that. And now you see this little bit of glaze we got there. Just take it off. Very easy to take off when you have waxed your pots. So I'm going to do all the floating blues and the different clays, and I'm going to do 2 of each of the clays, and then on half of them I'm also going to add Temmoku on the rim, and on some of them I'm going to add white on the inside. So this one splashed, but then I mentioned it's very, very easy to remove the glaze when you have it waxed. Just gonna make sure that we get it off. So I think that's good. On half of the pots where I put the floating blue on, I will also add the Temmoku Gold on the rim, because on my initial test, which was with reclaimed clay, it looked awesome. So now I'm going to see how that looks on the 5 different kinds of clay, if it looks just as fine, or if some of them are better or not. So we'll test that. So half of the floating blue will get that Temmoku Gold rim. So that's very, very easy. I just mixed it here. So again, I have a good grip on this. I'm just going to add a little bit. A little bit more on the outside. So, just going to shake it because I don't want it to run on the inside. I just want that that line. So I think this is going to be good. I hope. As mentioned, I also want to add some white inside. Not too much, just a little bit, maybe running down the side a little bit. And I'm using a Heath A2 White for that. You can look it up on glazes.org. It blends really well with the floating blue. I tried a lot of white glazes and not all of them are blending well with the floating blue, but this particular one does. But I don't want it to spill on the outside, so I'm not going to pour it in. Instead, I'm going to use this syringe. I got this, I think, on Amazon or something, or Wish maybe, I can't remember. Very cheap. So I'm going to soak up some of the white glaze. I'm just going to apply it inside gently, float it around a little bit, and that's a really good way to do it because then you don't spill, which I sometimes do if I was pouring it in, because it could drip and stuff. So let's do that. See, this is going to work well. So maybe I want to, some of them I will drip a little bit down the side. Now I have to do it on this one because I made a mistake. So that will make a nice dramatic effect. It was a little more than I expected because I have to do the video and I have to do the glazing at the same time. That could sometimes be challenging. I'm trying to be as logical as I can when I'm glazing, so I don't have to open too many buckets at once. I have a small room for this glaze in my basement. So I'm going to continue with the Temmoku Gold because I also have 9 bowls that I want to give a full layer of Temmoku Gold, and then on some of them I want to add a floating blue rim, so the opposite way of what I just did, because one of my tests showed that in the reclaim that I did, it looks really good, so I'm going to try that as well. And the Temmoku Gold also looks good if it's got a relatively thick layer, so that makes it easy when I have to glaze them like this. So first on the inside and then on the outside. And again, it kind of blurred a little bit, so I spilled some. In this case, I'm actually going to leave it and then take it off. No, I'm actually going to do it now. Again, it's very easy because of the wax to remove the glaze. So, oh, yeah, of course you need a clean sponge to actually do it, but I think, oh, there's something over there too. You've got to keep the sponge very clean, otherwise you just spraying the glaze in. So that's perfect. Now I'm ready to give half of them a little bit of the floating blue on the rim on top of this Temmoku Gold. I tested this with the reclaim bowls that I did, and it looked really good. So now I'm going to try it across all the different kinds of clay. And again, I want to let it dry a little bit before I turn it, because I don't want it to run. I want it to run in the fire, but not in the wet stage. So this is good. Look, nice. And I'm going to do that on half of them. And for each of them, I'm going to mark it in my spreadsheet, so I know exactly which one's got this extra treatment. I have sort of a signature brush stroke that I do with this fan brush on most of my bowls. However, on the floating blue and the Temmoku Gold, you just can't see it. It doesn't shine through, they cover everything. But on the folk art, on the other hand, it looks beautiful. So I'm gonna apply it to these 10 bowls because they're all gonna have folk art. And some of them are also gonna have my ash glaze on top of it, because I found out that even though the ash glaze had some problems in itself, it looked beautiful on top of folk art, at least on the reclaimed clay. So now we'll see how it works out on the other 4 types of clay. So I'll go ahead and brush these. It's sort of messy because it's a red iron oxide wash, so lots of water, and you have to be careful because it's so so messy. So sort of like this, and because the folk art reacts really well to iron, also in iron and clay, and this works really well with that. I actually found that it looks the best if you can keep it really nice, light like this, and kind of see the individual hairs in the stroke. It's sort of difficult because you have to do it very light. So that was the last one. Now I'm just going to let it dry because I don't want too much of this to go into the glaze, the folk art, even though there's lots of red iron in it already. I just don't want to add too much more. So just going to let it dry for a few moments. The folk art glaze, folk art Glaze White, I think it's called, doesn't need as much a thick layer as the Temmoku Gold and the floating blue. So I'm still going to pour it up, but I'm not going to spend so much time floating it around, just like this, and out, and a short dip, just a few seconds, and that's it. So that's enough for this glaze. So I'm going to glaze all 10 pots, and then half of them I'll try and give a dip on my ash glaze. Now for the last part, for some of these with the folk art, I'm going to add a thin layer of my ash glaze because it turned out in my test, although it was only on reclaim, that it looked really, really good. But I want it on the outside to cover what I already glazed, and the inside. And I don't want to dip it because then I have to wipe it all off. So for that I'm going to use this really cool trick. I'm going to dip it in and I'm going to pull it out slowly, and then I will pull it. And that will create a splash inside, and it should be glazed both inside and out in one go. So let's try. See? There's a little bit left here that I didn't. I can dip that. So That's fine. That's a really nice trick. So let's try again and see if it works. Yeah, see, perfectly glazed inside and out in one go. It's such an easy way. I finished all the glazing. It's always a lot of work when you have that many pots and you want to test different combinations and stuff. But I finished it and I packed the kiln last night, and it's been firing overnight and it just stopped. And now we're just waiting. Terrible time when it's cooled down. It's probably going to be 12-15 hours, so maybe later today or maybe early tomorrow I'll be able to open the kiln and see the results, and I will go through all the different variations with you, and especially in relation to how they look on the different clays. Waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Now it's finally below 100 degrees. So it's safe enough to open the lid a little bit and take a view and at least see how the first layer is. I will let it get a little bit colder before I start removing the pots. I like it to be like below 50 or something, but now at least I can lift the lid and it will cool faster for the last part. It looks good, but also somehow sort of surprising, because I did have some extra bowls that was not part of my combined glazing schedule, but they were all different clays, and it looks suspiciously identical. I mean, they all come out really nice with that black rim and nice goldy spots inside. But the different clays look actually very similar. Anyway, we will take a closer look at that when we get the first layers removed and then get down to the actual test that we did. So now I have access to the second layer. Let's take a quick look at that. It's pretty sunny now, so it's difficult to see, but they also look really good. This layer apparently have some of the folk art. And as you see, the folk art does come out very differently on the different clays. That's what I expected. We'll take a closer look at how they come out on the different kinds in a moment. I removed another layer, and so far everything looks really, really good. So let's look at what comes up here. This is really, really nice. These are some of the Temmoku Gold that I added something to the rim. I can't remember which one is what here, but I definitely added something to the rim, and it's really, really beautiful. So yeah, I'm looking forward to check my spreadsheet and see exactly what I did here. And now for the second last layer. This looks good too. Lots of really nice Temmoku Gold, but they do look very similar. Even though they're very different clays, there are some differences in the rim. And look at these floating blues with the white inside. I really like that. All in all, I'm very happy. I mean, all of these bowls individually came out really, really nice. There's something that is surprising, but it's all good. So now I'll have to go through my notes and see exactly what happened. Now I have sorted out all my bowls and the different variations that we tried out, and I sorted them by glazing. And I put the different clays in each of the stacks. So I did make a few mistakes on what I tried. I didn't include all the different clay types on all the different glazes because I was running out of the red one. Anyway, if we look at the floating blue first, that have been very consistent for me across different clays. And as you can see, this is the white, the buff stoneware, and this is the dark. I mean, there is small differences, but it's really not that dramatic. It kind of just floats on top of almost any kind of clay. And so I'm actually not so surprised to see that the only difference can be in how it breaks. It breaks a little darker on dark clay, obviously enough. But other than that, it's just so powerful, the glaze, that apparently, at least with the clays that I'm testing, there's no big difference. And the same thing can be said when we are trying, on this one I tried adding a little bit of the Temmoku Gold. It does add something really beautiful to the rim. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I will show some pictures in the end, some studio photos in the end. And here you begin to see a little more of a difference. It's kind of subtle. The two different blacks comes out very much the same, I would say. But on this one, and I have to check which one of the blacks it is. I think this is the original one, yeah. It does come out a little more black, or maybe I just added a little more. But they're very similar, but very beautiful. And even on, let me see here, even on the red one, which I would have suspected it would be, this is the red clay, I would have suspected it to be more different, but really it isn't. I mean, if you look at, this is a reclaim, this is a reclaim, and this is the red one. And I mean, it's very subtle differences. I'm actually quite surprised, and then again, not so much, because it is the floating blue and it is very consistent. Now for the folk art, because the folk art definitely changed color a lot based on the clay. Maybe it's also because I added a lot thinner than what I do with floating blue. This is on the red one, and I'm just crazy about this. It has some sort of wood-fired quality to it. The way that it changes so much, it's so much alive, almost like it's been wood-fired. It haven't been, but it got that quality. So I'm really happy with the red one, and it's definitely very different from, let's say, the white stoneware. I mean, this is the white or buff, for buffy kind of stoneware, and this is the red stoneware. And I mean, it looks like it's two different glazes, but it's not. It's the same glaze, same decoration. It's also really nice here. Don't get me wrong, I also like it here, but the way this comes out is just incredible. So if we look at the darker clays, it's sort of in between the light and the red, not surprisingly. There is some iron, I think, in this clay too. There's a beautiful dancing, but they're very different. And this one is another dark clay. They're actually very, I mean, the dark clays, I was testing, I had this stoneware that I used for ages. It's called STO6. It's from a local supplier. I don't know who actually produced it. It's from a local supplier in Denmark called 9 Glazes. You can go there and check it out. STO6. And I think, you know, this is the new one that I was trying out. It's a little more dark black, but it comes out very similar to each other with the floating, not floating blue, folk art. This one was actually a mistake, but it's on a dark clay, so it doesn't matter. Because I was also double dipping folk art with my ash glaze, because on my initial testing that showed some really promising results, and it did, even with this test. Because as you see, it made it sort of greenish. It did kind of cover most of my brush strokes with the iron inside. It's okay, because it comes out so beautiful. It has this sort of a greenish tone, and again, it has sort of these, you know, wood-fired kind of qualities. So this is a dark clay, and let's see if we can find something that's very different. Yeah, on the light clay, it's lighter. It's not dramatically different. It's a little more green on the light clay, but it's not dramatically different. And here we have, I think it's the reclaim, also similar. And again, the red one is maybe the one that comes out most different. And I think it's due to all that iron in it. And look at all those, I don't know if you can see there, but there's so many variations inside in how it flashes and breaks off, and I love that. It's a very beautiful glaze. It's a little bit expensive to mix because you have the tin component in it. So now for the Temmoku Gold, and I mean they all look awesome. There are some differences that I also think is due to how much was applied. If you take a look at these two, they are both on a dark clay. Yeah, they're both on a dark clay. One the new and one the old. I think this is the old and this is the new. And if you see inside, there's quite a lot of difference in. There's much more dark spots. I don't know if you can see it here. It's so sunny. I'll take some pictures for you. There's more dark spots in this one than there is in this one. I think it could be due to how much I actually put on. But on both clays it breaks off really, really beautiful. And again, on the red clay, it does come out different. I really like this clay. It does something really good with glazes, but it's definitely makes it a little more dark. It could be due to the high iron amount in this clay, because the Temmoku Gold is also based on a higher amount of iron. And here are and what is actually a big difference is on the white or the buffy stoneware. You can see, oh, there's a little bit of breakage. No, that was actually before glazed. Anyway, they have this rough feel, so I guess it's okay. If you look, I don't know if you can see it here, but if you look at the rim on the white clay, the rim is, yeah, more kind of iron red. So it doesn't have more of a reddish kind of tone to it, where on the darker clay and also on the reclaim, it's more black or dark, maybe with a hint of purple, but there's definitely, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's definitely a very big difference in the color on the rim where it breaks, on the white clay versus the dark clay. But the yellow is, funny enough, very identical. So whether you want to go with the white clay or the dark clay depends on what kind of color with this glaze, the Temmoku Gold, you want when it breaks on the rim. And then the final one that I'm so happy about, that's the combination of Temmoku Gold and floating blue on the rim. But look what it did to the rim. Because kind of the floating blue is falling down on this little double rim here, and it creates this beautiful skyline type of blue rim, but only on the breaking part. On the top part it's black and the bottom part it's black, and then it flows beautifully inside. This is on a dark clay. This is on the other dark clay, and as you can see, this is a little bit to do with luck, I guess. The floating blue kind of floated beautiful on the inside. And again, on the white clay, we also got this blue stripe all around, but again, the breaking is more reddish, sort of like iron reddish, not surprisingly. And this one is actually also with a white clay. Is one of them could be the reclaim? I'm not sure. Anyway, they all came out beautiful. I actually do like this more reddish type of variation on this one, but I'm not so crazy about this color. So maybe next time if I do them in this clay, I will give them sort of a wash, maybe with some manganese or combination of manganese and iron oxide is typically good for that. So just make it a little darker. I think that would be beautiful. All in all, I think it was very successful. I'm very happy, and I hope that you saw at least some of the differences. Some of them were less than I expected, but now we have something we can compare with, and I'll move on from that and select the ones that I like the most and make some more of them. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I hope you will subscribe to the channel and come back. Maybe leave a comment if you have some good comments, interesting comments. Maybe you did something crazy yourself and like to share that. Hope to see you all again. I will go and enjoy the summer. Here in the end of the video, I will show you some studio photos of some of the best results. I'm not going to show you all 35, that'll be way too long. I'll show you a few select that I really like, and I will keep a note on what exactly I did with them. Have a good day.